we have the Speed Chess Championship final between Alireza Firouzja and Magnus Carlsen. Before coming into the final, Alireza was in red hot form. He had just been crowned the World Bullet Champion. He had won another classical event, and even coming into the final here, he had defeated some strong players, including Magnus Carlsen's longtime rival Hikaru Nakamura in the semi-final. However, what happened in the final is just Magnus played a different form of chess and he completely dominated the game, completely dominated the match, and won with a scoreline of 23.5 to Magnus and 7.5 to Alireza. Complete domination. I believe there were four main reasons why Magnus was able to dominate this match, and as we go along in the game, I'll reveal those. However, when the match initially started, it looked like a very close contest. Okay, we'll dive into game number 4, where Alireza opens with e4 and e5. We have the Italian opening. Alireza is playing white and Magnus is playing black. Excuse me. Both sides are playing standard opening theory at this point, rerouting their pieces to decent squares. And in this position, Alireza took borders knight to f1. The idea is usually to go knight e3 or knight g3 and put the knight on either of the d5 or f5 square. So after knight f1, knight h4, Alireza took, Carlsen took, and the knight goes to e3, landing on d5. So Carlsen stopped it with the move c6, g3, and Alireza improved his position on the king side slightly, and then he decided to double the rooks on the d file that is there. And in this position, Magnus played g5, which is a very big mistake. This is not like the Magnus Carlsen move you expect, because it seriously weakens the square. And now Alireza very nicely takes advantage of this by just putting the rook on d6. And after gh4, he takes on c6. Now the point is, black cannot afford to go h into g3, because this would allow rook into c8, and the knight would jump on f5 and gobble the queen. So that's why this whole problem with the g5 move was there is now nobody to guard this f5 square, and once you eliminate the bishop, the knight is very happy to land here. So after gh4, we have rook c6, bishop g5. Anyway, Alireza took here. Once again, if you capture the rook, there is knight f5 check, which means you first have to eliminate the knight, which is what Magnus played. But now Alireza just wins an extra piece here. There is an extra piece, and now Magnus plays queen g5, hoping to create an attack against the black king. Now, however, Alireza very calmly defends his position. First, he brings his queen back to defense to guard along this second rank, so that after black captures on g3, the king can drop back and the queen joins the defense. And with very nice play here, he just converted his advantage with extra piece, and very soon Magnus had to resign in the position. Here is where Magnus resigned, and Alireza won the game. However, Magnus is known for being someone who has a slow start in most events. In the beginning phase, he's a little rusty. Even if you see his games against Hans Niemann, very rusty in the beginning. However, once he finds his groove, he becomes a very difficult opponent to beat. So we'll dive into the next game, game number 5, where you'll see main reason that, Magnus was able to dominate this match. So first, we have d4, knight f6, c4, g6. Magnus is playing white, Alireza is playing black. Alireza chooses to go with the King's Indian setup, which is many games, in fact, in this match, he played with the King's Indian setup. Magnus continues to develop. Both sides are following normal opening theory here. Magnus takes, queen c2, knight h5. Now the idea of this move is to put the knight on f4. Very interesting idea, very standard. However, the problem here is, even if the knight lands on f4, it's not really doing much, because white's king side is still very nicely protected even after knight f4. Meanwhile, Magnus continues to get his pieces on good squares, and black is now really in a problem after this c5 move. His queen side is completely clamped down, and it's gonna be a challenge to develop both these pieces. So the knight goes to f8. Now the knight lands on b6, rook b8. Carlsen takes and gets his rook very active on this d6 square. So Alireza plays b6, trying to break out of this bind on the queen side. Black takes and goes e5, protecting the rook and getting more space in the center, also opening the diagonal for this queen, and sometimes even the bishop can land on c4 or d3. Black takes, and now the bishop lands on c4. A very nice diagonal here for the bishop. Black plays rook d8 and Carlsen plays queen d2. Very nice move, protecting the rook and also keeping an eye on both these weak pawns. Black plays g5, protects one of the pawn. Carlsen plays h3. Nice move, creating a luft for the king and also protecting the g4 square. Black goes knight g6 and Carlsen goes rook d1, asking the black rook what it is going to do, since now the threat is rook into d8. So the black rook decides to take. Now Magnus takes e into d6, queen drops to a7. Not the best move, although it's very hard for black what to do. Queen d7 would have been a way to play. However, even in this position, white's pieces are just very active. White can take this pawn and continue the game and keep that advantage. So however, in the game, e d6, queen a7 was played. Now queen d3. Now there is a threat to capture the knight since the f pawn is pinned here. So the knight had to drop back. Rook e1, the threat is to land the rook on e7. Rook d8, rook e7 anyway. There is now a threat to capture this f7 pawn. Rook d7, white takes, king moves and takes and puts the bishop back. This pawn is a very strong asset in the position. So black has to somehow try to get rid of it or at least block it. Queen c4 threatens a checkmate on g8. The queen drops back to d8, protecting against the mate. Queen e6, bishop b2. If you're losing, it's anyway okay if you can be greedy and grab some material. So bishop b2, d7. The idea is queen e8 now. So the knight drops to f6, preventing any thing on e8. Knight e5, captures, king g7. Now this queen is very nicely placed on the diagonal, pinning the knight. But now the d7 pawn is in danger, which means Carlsen has to bring his bishop to protect it. c4, trying to distract this bishop from protecting the pawn. Anyway, the queen drops back, keeps an eye on the pawn and also maintains the pin along the diagonal. King moves and now Carlsen goes check. Excuse me, king moves and grabs the c6 pawn. g4, trying to create counterplay here. Carlsen just takes the free pawn. Check. Now if you go queen c8, there is going to be king e7. So Carlsen decides to first give a check on c5, preventing king e7, and once the king moves, he puts this queen on c8. And now the queen, once the queen moves, there's going to be another queen and it's going to be completely winning for white in the position. So Alireza resigned and Magnus won a very nice game. And this is one quality of Magnus that I want to highlight. Whenever he loses, he always finds a way to come back into the game. You know, he never allows his opponent to go on a winning streak. He always finds a way to come back. And speaking of that, the second point that I want to highlight here is, this was game number 5. He won game number 5. He won game number 6. He won game number 7. He won game number 8. Magnus won all these games. Okay. So whenever Magnus gets a chance, gets some momentum going, he's always able to, in most cases, he's able to, you know, make the most out of that momentum. And this is exactly what he did in the match. Even after that, game number 9 and 10 ended up in draws. But from game number 11, 12, 13, 14, once again, Magnus won all those 4 games and just kept the momentum with him. Another set of victories happened in, I think, game number 17, 18, 19, 20. All of them Magnus won. So he had these winning streaks, very long winning streaks, that, you know, really helped him to push his lead forward. I also want to highlight another thing that happened in the match. For that, we have to see game number 14. So we are in game number 14. Magnus is playing with the black pieces. Alireza is playing with the white pieces. We have the Italian opening on the board. In this game, Magnus chose to play e4, e5 and play Italian or Royal Lopez systems. Sorry, Alireza played Italian, but Magnus chose how to respond to Italians and Royal Lopez. Castle, rook e1, d6, a4, a5. And both sides are developing their pieces here. Magnus loses a pawn in this position. However, he still has some compensation since white's pieces are not yet fully developed in the game. Bishop f6. Now the rook drops to e3. Knight d5, takes. Yes, black has 2 bishops, but white has an extra pawn. Knight e4, rook e8. Now the bishop drops to b2, protecting the pawn and developing the piece. Bishop g5 was played. The rook drops back. f5, c4. Attacking the bishop. Black takes, Carlsen takes, and now e3. Trying to expose this king a little. So Alireza takes, rook e3 we have on the board, and rook a e1. Now again there is a threat on the rook, so black takes. You can't play here a move like queen to d5 because it would allow queen c7 and all kinds of nasty threats on g7. So Carlsen finds the best defensive move, that is bishop f6. Okay, bishop into f6. queen into f6, and rook e4. Rook f8 happens. Now white has to be a little careful since there is a checkmate here, and Alireza decides to play h3, which is a huge blunder. And this is a point that I want to highlight. In the game, there were many instances where Alireza made blunders that just instantly finished off the game. Magnus, however, on the other hand, made very few blunders, and even if Magnus made blunders, he would still find a way to, keep up the resistance, as you'll soon see in game number 4, or the next game that we are going to see. So h3 was played, queen f1 check, king h2, and rook f2. Now there is a threat of checkmate on g2, and at the same time the queen is attacked. There is just no way that white can defend against both the threats, and Alireza had to resign. Magnus won the game. I believe this was game number 14, so Magnus once again had a very huge lead in the position in the match. And yeah, we'll go on to the next game. So this was, I think, game number 17, where I want to highlight a key skill that Magnus displays here. So d4, Magnus is playing with the white pieces, Alireza is playing with black, d4, knight f6. Once again, we have the King's Indian setup from Alireza. Both sides are following opening theory. I won't dive much into the details of that since this is a blitz. Oh, sorry, this is a blitz, 3+1. Takes, castle, knight c6. And if you see in this position, now the c5 pawn is protected. Knight e5, rook e1, knight d4, bd4, knight c6, bishop b5. Now the bishop b5 move is actually not a good move, it's a mistake, and Alireza finds the best way to continue from here. He first captures the knight on d4, the bishop on d4. Now Magnus takes the rook, and now Alireza goes bishop g7. The point is, this bishop on e8 is completely trapped. It can't go here, can't go here, can't go here, can't go here. It's just trapped on e8. And this was a very nice point. Okay, so Alireza wins the bishop. So the bishop just decides to sacrifice itself tries to inflict maximum damage in the position. Bishop f7 was played. And now the queen drops to f2. Queen a5, keeping an eye, attacking the knight. So the knight has to jump back. Now black also moves his knight back, and Alireza has two minor pieces for a rook, and this is usually considered to be a very big advantage. However, as you'll soon see, Magnus just doesn't give up in the position. He just keeps fighting, and he makes it as hard as possible for black to find any way to win. Look at this move, knight e4. Okay, black cannot take d4 because black is going to lose the queen. And he's just complicating the game a lot. This is often what you should be doing when you are, on the defensive side. Complicate the game, put up resistance, and don't allow your opponent an easy victory. So knight e4, bishop g5, knight c5, bishop f6, knight b7. Now all of a sudden, Magnus has got one pawn out of nowhere, and he has some compensation here. Rook b8, knight d6, d4. Black's big asset is, of course, this pawn on d4, knight e7. Very hard to play, especially with such low time. Alireza has just 6 seconds in the match. Rook c7. The rook invades, rook d8, attacking the knight jumps to e4, knight f5, takes, d3, g4, knight h4. Knight h4 was apparently a mistake. However, in such a time scramble, it looks like a very natural move to play. And in this position, this f3 pawn is attacked. Now, if it were me, I would find a move like rook f1. But however, it's Magnus Carlsen, it's not me. So Magnus obviously finds the best move, which is rook d1 in the position. And yeah, this once again, it just shows that how much he's able to put up resistance in such positions. h6, knight c5, and now the position is equal. In fact, there is a threat of knight e6 check. So Alireza goes rook e8, preventing any knight e6 ideas. Knight e4 once again, rook d8. And in this position, he plays rook c8. Another blunder. However, this time it was more of a mouse slip that happened. Because of which he played rook c8 and not rook d8. Otherwise, the game would have ended in a draw because it would have been a repetition. Can you find how white wins? If you want, you can pause the video. So white simply has the move rook into f7 check. And the point is, after king into f7, you have knight d6 check, winning the rook. So that's why after the move rook into f7 check here, black resigned, and once again Magnus was able to win the game and push his lead forward even further. And this was the theme during the entire match. By the way, I was rooting for Alireza Firouzja in this match. Let me know who are you rooting for in the comment section. However, Magnus just completely dominated it. and he just shows that, you know, he's much ahead of anyone else in terms of the chess that is being played in the modern day. If you enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to my channel. I usually make game review videos. So thank you very much for watching.